What is up, everybody? It is Alex from Heavy New York, calling from the Altar again. And after 6 long years, we return with Dylan Desmond of Bellwitch, as well as the fantastic new project Je Est Un Autre, or how do you say it?
Je Est Un Autre.
I was close. Yeah, I'll go with you. But
I might not be close either.
fair enough. But it is so awesome to have you here because the album title, which I can't pronounce, Flatworm Mysticism, is an absolutely beautiful, atmospheric, really just mesmerizing experience. I don't consider it like an album listen as much as like I put that on and I go on sort of like an experience in a way. Was there sort of like a vision behind this? Because I feel like your work with Bellwitch, like Mirror Reaper, which is probably one of my favorite albums of my 20s to have come out, you were always great at building up an atmosphere and building up a setting. So were you like kind of expressing something with this project that maybe you couldn't express in Bellwitch or didn't want to or something?
Um, Maybe to some effect, yeah. The project kind of came out of during the pandemic. I started doing a Patreon channel through Bellwitch that was I would take like a 5 to 10 minute clip of like a classic film and make a little soundtrack to it. And after about a year or so doing those, I was realizing that I was kind of I wanted to do more of it. So I started this project more or less because of the way I had been getting familiar with the synthesizers I was using with the Patreon work. And this just kind of came out of that. And I think, to answer your question, I think that the idea is that it stays a little bit more in the ambient realm than Bellwitch. Bellwitch kind of has peaks and valleys. There's movements, whereas this is maybe a little less movement oriented so far. And more centered on like a maybe like dwelling on something or focusing on something and kind of watching that thing expand and contract in maybe a more minute details than in big extravagant movements.
Because I've always thought that like atmosphere was sort of like we call Matt Pike like the king of the riff or something like that. Ozzy Osbourne, the Prince of Darkness. I feel like you are almost the prince or king, whatever you want to be, of atmosphere. Because I feel like that there is an art to creating an atmospheric experience, like a band like Sun or Sun O, as people would read it. I feel like is another good example of that in a way. Then there's times where like it almost feels like just one drawn sustained note sometimes on a bad angle where like I can't tell if it's a line check or an atmospheric experience. So is there
Sure.
sort of like an art of balance? You mentioned the peaks and valleys with Bellwitch, but even with a consistent record like Flatworm Mysticism, is there almost kind of like an art to building an atmosphere in a way?
I think so. Yeah, like you just said, one can just drone on a note, and cool shit happens in that. Like for anyone that's you know had their guitar or bass feed back into an amplifier, weird chaotic shit pops up, and you kind of start to feel like, okay, how can I control that? And there's really cool shit that happens in there. With something like this, it's less. This album is less of a drone, maybe more. It is compositions, and there is a you know there are movements, contrary to how I just put it, and it does. There is a pulse to it, and I think that the I think the key is attention to expansion. Like where does that pulse lie, and how does it develop? I think a lot of rock and roll is focused on the same thing, really. Like there's just a pulse, there's a steady beat, the song develops, maybe there's a hook, and maybe the song builds up, and there's a you know a grand finale even, and everything kind of has this explosive moment. That's not necessarily something that happens on this album. Everything's focused and level, better said than focused. And I think the idea is to dwell, like I was saying, to kind of to maybe dissociate and disconnect even from, like, I'm not sure how people are going to listen to it, and they're going to do whatever they want to do with it. But for me, listening to things in this genre of music, I want to feel like I'm transcending reality or disassociating with reality, and kind of like uh, maybe floating through whatever I'm doing while I'm listening to it. Be
Well,
it sitting on the couch, be it walking,
you
cooking.
you succeed in that with every project you're in, Bellwitch or this this
Right on.
new project. But you mentioned with your use of synthesizers on it too, were you maybe taking inspiration from different sources as well? Because like I feel like maybe there's almost kind of like some industrial in the DNA with this project.
Sure, sure. I think maybe less industrial. That's you're not incorrect in that. I think maybe I was looking in the direction of like William Basinski and Eliana Radigue. I'm probably mispronouncing her name also. Um,
No judgment, I mispronounced the band name. So
right on. Me too. Um, and probably Hindering Dream also, or Coil, which kind of gets into the industrial realm. Um, and maybe just kind of like, I mean, I think electronic instruments like the synthesizers can easily lean towards industrial stuff, in the way that like Blade Runner could lean in that direction. I don't think that was their intention to lean in that direction, but it kind of you know planted the seed for things to. I mean, I don't know. Those seeds were already planted, but it worked in a direction that was already going. It kind of went with the grain very, very well. Um, yeah, I don't know if industrial was necessarily what I was looking at, but I think that I see where you're coming from. There is some of that deep, like distorted low end that would be a signature thing in a lot of industrial bands.
or artists like Arthur and Punisher, for example.
Sure. Yeah. A lot more, a lot less aggressive than Author and Punisher, however. But yeah, he does that too, masterfully. That's an amazing band.
You're Arthur and Punisher on Xanax. That's how you could.
Author and Punished.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. There you go. But you are such a prolific artist. I mean, when you look at your like Metal Archives page, for
Hey, thank
example,
you.
because with Bellwitch, but you also were in a lot of other different bands as well. So, like, does the creative process change? Is there a different mind frame depending on what project you're playing with, or is there sort of like a typical method behind the madness that sort of applies to everything?
A good question. I mean, I think a little of both. Like, I think in approaching, okay, so like approaching a Bellwitch song, there is a, I don't want to say there's a format or an outline that I'm approaching it with, but there is definitely a narrow, there's not a format. There's not like A goes to B goes to C, but there is a narrow range of things that could happen. Now, I think within that range, there's a whole world that can be explored. And my intention with that project is to dive into those things and see how they can be expanded and have worlds of their own. With this, I mean, I think that's the case with most any band to some effect. Like there's bands like Coil that do all sorts of things. Like one album is totally different from the next, despite some being similar. Um, Tangerine Dream would be that same way. I think I something I like about this project is I feel like this has more open-endedness to it. While it's been founded on a synthesizer basis, that'll probably always continue. But I think the ambient nature of it invites other instrumentation, and it invites expanding in other directions under that same umbrella. I'm looking forward to that. I've got this. I have an old friend that I grew up with who died a couple years ago. And when her brother and I were kind of cleaning out her apartment, she had an old cello that it was busted. I think that she was going to throw it away, but it was kind of just laying around. And I remember years back, I had house sat for her and like took care of her cat while she was out of town. And she was like, "I don't have any money to pay you with, but I bought a new cello on Craigslist. You can try to learn the cello." And that weekend, I was like, "Yeah, I'm gonna learn the cello. That sounds like fun." So he let me take that cello. I went and fixed it up, and I don't know how to play the cello, but I was thinking I could try to, I don't know, somehow work with that to make some kind of, something would come out of it. And I could try to make an album based around that, sort of as kind of a, I don't know, little monument to her, or I don't know, to our friendship, or to whatever that is.
That's a very beautiful. That's a very beautiful. That's a very beautiful idea in the making. I'm very excited to see what might come of that. Please make that like your next project.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
Totally.
there was one Bell Witch question I actually have always wanted to ask you. I can't remember if I asked it on the Yob tour or not, but I think it's more relevant to ask it now because Bell Witch has a fantastic catalog. I love Longing. I love Four Phantoms. I love Mirror Reaper. I love the album you just put out last year, Future Shadow Part 1. But when you're playing live, I haven't seen you since the Yob tour, but if you were to play like a live headlining, let's say you have like an hour and a half to 2 hour performance time to play live, how would you make exactly like a Bell Witch set list? Because Mirror Reaper is just an hour and a half long song
Sure.
in itself. And I know that Future Shadows Part 1, that's part 1. We're going to get a sequel to that, if you will. So how would you sort of dictate the set list and cater to the people who may want to hear stuff off of Longing or Four Phantoms, as well as
Sure.
maybe creating a good Mirror Reaper experience, and then as well as having to promote the new Bell Witch stuff?
Sure. We just kind of find a section that works, and trim the fat before and after it. Sometimes even in the middle, I guess, depending on the set. On this touring with the Clandestine Gate, we've just been doing from the beginning up until like the 3/4 mark. And in performing it live, it kind of has a little more. Sometimes the parts expand themselves a little bit, and we kind of indulge in like a rest and make a pregnant pause, as some would say. So it ends up being around like 70-ish minutes, which is longer than it is on the record. But it's the same composition as on the record. And we did the same thing with Mirror Reaper. In performing that live, we were just doing like essentially the first half of the record before Eric Moggridge's part came in. And that got expanded to where it's like we were playing it a little bit slower live than it is on the record. I think that ended up being like 53-ish. It's an odd number, but it ended up being right around there, which was perfect for a set. And all the bands we toured with were gracious enough to let us play. I think usually like the support slots we were doing were like on the Yob tour, for example. I think they were like, 45 minutes. And we were like, what about 53 minutes? They were like, okay, weirdos, like 53 minutes it is.
Well, I mean, I don't think Yob is exactly one to judge about certain song lengths either.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, they were, yeah. I think the tours we did on that regard were Yob, Sleep, and Neurosis. And none of those bands were like, oh no, 45 minutes is all you get, kids. Yeah, they're all easy judges in that regard. And historically, that band would combine songs together. We would kind of write little, before Jesse and I did Mirror Reaper, when Adrian and I were working on stuff, we would write little interludes to connect a song that it was like, okay, well, what's the set going to be for, the show in a month? Let's do this. And somehow we got to connect these two songs. So let's make this weird, little, kind of extended drone thing we'll do some hits or whatever. And we kind of do little things like that so that we didn't have to stop in between songs. I think that if Motorhead stops in between songs, of course, everyone wants to hear Lemmy say, how are you all doing tonight? Hello, Chicago, or whatever it was that Ace Frehley would say.
No offense, but I think with bands, I'm just going to call your genre Cascadian metal because I just can now just tell what band is from Portland, Oregon at this point, or from
Sure.
or Seattle or something like that, your neck of the woods. But I almost wouldn't want, I almost feel like I would not want crowd interaction. I feel
No.
like I want just the music to go, and
Absolutely.
like no introduction, maybe say hi when you come on stage and later when you get off, but like I think that talking in between songs at a set like yours would be a total buzzkill.
God, I totally agree, and that's exactly what I was getting at too. Like you're dead on. It was like when there is that pause in between songs, it was awkward. It was like, fuck this. Like that kills the vibe. We wanted to just sustain throughout. That's what we're going for. So we would write these little interludes to kind of connect the songs together, which was fun. And I think toying with that idea is probably how we got to what's happening now, where it's like, let's just write through that. And the song doesn't necessarily end. It continues on. So yeah, I think that's how the live aspect has always played out with Bell Witch, and I think that vibe is consistent through on Flatworm Mysticism, for example. The first 3 tracks just kind of bleed over into each other, which was, I don't know how that plays out on like a streaming format. I think that it plays through, and one doesn't necessarily hear that there's a track cut in there. Ideally there is no track cut in there, but there actually is, the way that it's uploaded, which sucks. But I was gonna do the whole album like that, and I guess it kind of felt like the way the 4th song was starting just didn't want something overlapping onto it, and my computer started crashing because the file was getting too big.
Your bass was too much for your computer.
Yeah, I mean, it was just like the file was just getting huge as it was venturing into like the 30-minute mark, and I'm not like, I don't have a super nice computer, and I'm not very very tech savvy, so I didn't quite know how to fix that. So I was like, maybe it's time to just start a new track.
Well, this is why I have so much respect for the doom, or the the type of bands in your genre, because I feel like everything, and I mean everything, works against you guys, and you still continue to kill it. Because let's be real, people's attention spans suck nowadays. So so it's really hard to keep them engaged continuously in an album like that. Streaming services you're at war with them to promote that stuff. I feel like the music, and I don't mean it as like in a negative way, because I think your music resonates with a lot of people. But like, it is an acquired taste. I'm not gonna market Bell Witch to Taylor Swift fans. Just
Sure.
sorry, if you guys do a Taylor Swift cover, that'd be hilarious. But like, I feel like you guys are creating a reality that's difficult for people to step into, but once they do step into it, it just completely changes their world. So I think I
appreciate saying that.
I feel like the genre of music that all of you play, whether it's you guys, Yob, Isonortal, who's based out of the region, who's really good, like, I feel like you guys are almost kind of like that haunted house that people are like afraid to go into. They're kind of looking outside and afraid to walk into, but once they finally do go into it, their world has changed forever.
I love that. That's thank you. That's great.
Yeah, thank you. Anytime, man. And then the final question I wanted to ask you is, this is sort of like a new question that I had. I actually asked it for the first time in a previous interview with a band, and you're the second time. And it's talking about noise versus music, because I've seen a lot of bands, not even just in your genre, but like a lot of bands, like industrial bands, even some death metal bands and whatnot, almost call their stuff noise as a means of marketing. Check out this heavy ass noise, like almost as if they're trying to be edgy, or it sells in a way like noise, like cool noise. But I've heard the same people who hate this genre label it noise. It's just noise. That's not real music. Now, I do think that there is a difference between noise and music. My neighbor's dog barking or the sirens outside is not music. It's straight up noise. But I've heard a lot of bands, like Sun, for example, that would be classified as noise from the outside looking in, and I would consider it noise, but I get lost in it the same way that I would listen to music. So how would you say there is sort of like a differentiation between noise and music? If you're going to market your stuff as noise, how are you going to like say it that it's not just dogs barking and sirens screeching,
Yeah. I mean, that's a good question, and that's a interesting realm that I think a lot of people are looking at. Maybe definitely now, and maybe the past 20 years even. and it asked a lot of questions of how do we, as individuals, what do we perceive as music, and at what point does it become art? Like you said, like when there's dogs barking outside, there's cars driving by, and there's someone fixing their roof. There's the sound of the fucking nail gun going off, and like all those weird random noises. Just noise of the world around us. Like how does, when someone takes those noises and recreates them, I mean, I would hope that they would do more than just play a recording of it, because playing a recording of that, I don't really think has much artistic relevance, unless it can be done in a way that puts
Go to the Museum of Modern Art. There's plenty of people who would market it as this work of art. Here is the noise of me hitting this chair. It's significant in its meaning.
Sure, but I think that like if it's put into a context where like there is supposed to be an emotion conveyed, all of a sudden that whole thing changes. Like if one can make the sound of, the roofer 4 doors down using their nail gun, if somehow that can be, or someone hitting their chair in a room, if somehow that can be done in a way that someone else feels a sense of emotion from it, all of a sudden it is, there is artistry going on. Whether or not it's something anyone wants to observe is up to them, of course. But, and I mean, that's fucking cool stuff, like that's, it kind of gets into the whole postmodernism and maybe into the symbolists and the maybe even touching on what the surrealists were doing, or the Dadaists, or
You're an art history fan?
I've been trying to learn more about it. Yeah,
I went to art school, so every chance I get to talk art history, I'm like, oh, fuck the album, we're talking this now.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that it falls into those categories. It's obviously it's sound, so it's different than. And I don't know what art history classes are like, but I imagine that they're more focused on visual.
Yeah.
Oriented or.
Yeah, I mean they'll incorporate music, because if you really look at it, like music and the art world have evolved simultaneously. Just like I took an art history class called Art, Science, and the Spiritual, and you would see on how every time there was a new scientific advancement, it actually influenced on how artists would do it. Like when Haeckel came up with this theory of light and how that alters color, that was a huge inspiration for the Impressionists. And then you see how the philosophies and spirituality changed over the times as well.
Sure. Yeah, obviously that they're all I mean, it's kind of like it's all a reflection of the human experience. And in that regard, I mean, I think that that's where that maybe like the more avant-garde noise stuff that is becoming, it has become popular in the past, decades. And it is, I mean, I would argue at a pinnacle. I don't know if it's going to become less popular, but I would say it's at a high point right now. It kind of reflects what's going on maybe in the world. Like you were saying, our attention spans are fucked up. And I don't think any of us necessarily want our attention spans to be fucked up. It's happening kind of against our will. I don't know. Maybe life is a push against one's will. So I don't know. Maybe that's just how it goes in every age and time and whatnot. But I mean, I think a pushback, maybe a rebellion against that, is what people are doing with noise or drone music, or I mean, music is kind of the in quotation word, I guess, because it is all subjective, and one might not find that one might not find the emotion in it, whereas someone else might. Yeah, I mean. Yeah, we could talk about that all day, I guess.
And I'm glad we did. I'm really glad that I got to have this part 2 with you, because I remember when I was interviewing you at the Yob show, we were like in the corner by the stairwell while sound test was happening. So I was asking you all these deep questions while there was a line check. You were trying your best to answer it, and you answered them like a pro. I'm grateful for that. But we were just like, it was like one of those, like, it was like a war zone where we were.
Yeah, Mike's guitar is blasting, and it's like, well, hold on.
Yeah, no, it happens all the time. So I'm glad because I got to ask you a lot of the questions that I've wanted to ask you 6 years ago. So
What city was that in?
New York City, Les Poissons Rouge.
Ah, right on. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay,
that
gotcha.
awesome venue, coldest venue as well. I could see my own breath in there, even if it's in the middle of July. But like I attended Summer Slaughter there. It was like in the middle of July, and even I was freezing in there. But
Fuck.
yeah. But before we go, I want to thank you so much for your time and for an awesome conversation. But most of all, like for real, thank you for just continuing to give us amazing new music with Bell Witch and this fantastic new project. Just with the release of Je Est Un Autre, that's how I will know it as well, with Flatworm Mysticism. Is there just anything else you would like to promote for this or Bell Witch or any other project you're involved with, what we could be expecting anytime soon?
Um, thanks for all that. I appreciate that. Bell Witch is working on the next Stygian Bow record right now. We're about to go on like a long extended tour, so obviously that gets put on hold. But as soon as we're back, I have to finish up some school stuff. But we've got skeletons set for that album. We're gonna start diving into that probably this summer, and I imagine it'll be done by the end of the year. I think it won't be released this year, but yeah, I've got the workings of the next Je Est Un Autre album pretty much on my hard drive that just need to be kind of tinkered with a little bit, and maybe tinkered with a lot. We'll see how that goes. And yeah.
Well, I look forward to hearing that, and I look forward to having another interview to promote that album as well. But
Right on. Likewise.
yeah, but thank you so much, everybody. We are here with Dylan of Bell Witch and Je Est Un Autre, Flatworm Mysticism. Be sure to check that out. This is Alex from Heavy New York, and we will see you next time. Perfect, man. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.